When I first signed the divorce papers, the silence that followed was deafening. I used to think that once the shouting stopped, once the bitter tension between me and Mark gave way to paperwork and signatures, peace would follow. But peace didn't come. Just the echo of everything that had been lost. The boys and I moved into a smaller house at the edge of town. It was nothing extravagant. 2 stories with creaky stairs and a view of the woods from the back porch. But it was ours. For the first time in years, I had to reimagine what home meant without their father's presence shaping the air. Noah, my oldest, was 22, already testing his wings in college, drifting between his classes and odd jobs, trying to figure out who he was without trying too hard to show it. And then there was Tyler, 19, bright-eyed, and still tethered to high school and the ache of boyhood. We had always been close. Close in the way a mother bonds with her sons when the father is too absent even in his presence. But something shifted after the divorce. Something unspoken. It started with dinners. They didn't used to eat with me much. Noah would grab something in town, and Tyler always had some friend dragging him to a pizza joint or a late-night drive-thru. But after the move, they came home more. They stayed longer. Sometimes I'd look up from the stove to find them already at the table, waiting. Not impatiently, not with hunger, but like the ritual of family had suddenly become sacred. Tyler was the first to start helping in the kitchen. He wasn't much of a cook, but he liked chopping vegetables, stirring pots, leaning against the counter while I moved around. And he listened, really listened, to the things I said. I hadn't realized how rare that was until then. "Do you miss him?" he asked one evening, softly, over the sound of the faucet running. I looked up from the dishes, water dripping from my fingers. His eyes, his father's eyes, searched mine, gentle but firm. "No," I said after a moment. "Not him. Just the idea of what I thought we had." He nodded. "I get that." Noah didn't talk about the divorce much, but I could tell he was watching everything. He'd sit with me in the mornings when the house was quiet, sipping coffee he didn't really like, asking about my day like it mattered. He didn't used to do that. Maybe he was trying to understand what had changed in me, or maybe he was trying to understand what was changing in him. One afternoon, we were sitting on the back porch, watching the trees lose their last leaves to the wind. Noah was quiet for a long time before he said, "You seem different now." "Different how?" I asked, folding my arms against the chill. "Lighter. Like you're not pretending so hard anymore." I didn't answer at first. I just let his words settle. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I think I like this version of you more." That caught me off guard. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. As if he wasn't speaking as a son. As if he were seeing me through a lens I hadn't known he had. Later that evening, I found a photo buried in an unpacked box. It was of all 3 of us, me, Noah, and Tyler, on the beach from years ago. The boys were still small, and I had my arms wrapped around them, smiling like I hadn't learned disappointment yet. I sat on the couch with the photo in my lap until the light outside faded. Tyler wandered in from his room and saw me staring at it. "We were so little," he said with a soft laugh, sitting beside me. "You looked happy." I traced my thumb over the image. I was. I didn't know it then, but I was. Tyler leaned his head on my shoulder. "You can be again." He didn't move for a long time. And neither did I. There's something strange about a house where the only voices are your own and those you raised. Sometimes I'd catch one of them watching me in the quiet moments. Noah with his thoughtful silences, Tyler with his open, unfiltered admiration. I wondered if they saw me now as someone new. I wondered if I saw myself the same way. It's a delicate thing, this new rhythm between us. It isn't loud. It's quiet and careful and filled with the weight of unspoken feelings that brush against something tender. We weren't just mother and sons anymore. We were something else. Something closer. And that closeness, though comforting, was starting to feel like it held 1,000 possibilities I wasn't sure how to name. I began to notice the smallest things. The way Noah's voice softened when he asked how I was sleeping. The way Tyler would pause in the doorway before leaving for school, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. We had grown into a space where silence had more meaning than conversation ever did. One evening in early spring, the rain tapped gently on the windows like a secret trying to get in. Tyler and I were in the living room, a half-watched movie playing on the TV forgotten. He was lying on the floor, feet propped up on the arm of the couch, one hand tucked under his head. I sat above him, a knitting project abandoned in my lap. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked suddenly, eyes still on the ceiling. I glanced at him, surprised by the question. "Starting over how?" "I don't know. Life. Doing something different. Being someone different." I smiled faintly. "Every day." He turned his head to look at me, his face boyish and open. "You think it's too late?" "No," I said quietly. "Not for you. Not for me either, I guess." He nodded, then looked away again. The soft glow from the TV bathed the room in shifting light, and I found myself watching him longer than I should have. There was something so unguarded about him in those moments, something I hadn't seen since he was small, before the world taught him to shield his feelings behind sarcasm and laughter. A week later, Noah invited me out to lunch. Just the two of us. It was something he hadn't done since he was in high school. We sat on the patio of a quiet cafe downtown, the sun warming our faces, the sound of passing cars blending with light jazz on the speakers. "You seem different," he said after our food had arrived. "That's the second time you've said that," I replied, sipping my iced tea. "Because it's true." He paused, then leaned in slightly. "You're softer now. Calmer. Like you've let something go." I studied him. There was a maturity in Noah that sometimes caught me off guard. He looked so much like his father in some ways, but the way he listened, the way he saw people, that was all his own. "I'm learning who I am without being someone's wife," I admitted. "It's strange." He smiled at that. "I like who you're becoming." Later that night, I stood in the doorway of Noah's old room, now mostly storage and half-unpacked boxes, and realized I had built my life around others for so long that I'd forgotten how to be someone for myself. But now, with only these two men, the boys I had raised, who had somehow become my equals, there was room to grow. One Saturday, the power went out during a thunderstorm. We lit candles and gathered in the living room, wrapped in blankets like a makeshift fort. Tyler sat beside me on the couch, and Noah lay across the floor, his feet resting on the coffee table. It reminded me of when they were little, of board games and storybooks and hot chocolate. But now they were taller, broader, their voices deeper. They were men now, and I was no longer just mom, in the way I had been. "I remember when we used to play flashlight tag during storms," Noah said, smiling into the dim light. "I remember tripping over Tyler's toy truck and almost breaking my leg," I added, laughing. "You still have that scar," Tyler said, brushing my arm gently. "Right here." His fingers touched just below my elbow, and I felt it, an unexpected flicker of something beneath my skin. I didn't move. His touch wasn't inappropriate, just focused, more attentive than necessary. Our eyes met, just briefly, but it was enough. The air grew heavy again, like it had that night on the porch when he leaned against me after looking at old photos. It wasn't tension. It wasn't desire. It was something more dangerous, unspoken closeness, quiet understanding. The kind that makes you forget boundaries, even if only for a moment. Noah looked at us, and I thought maybe he noticed, maybe he felt it too, the way the space between all of us was subtly shifting. After that night, we all started lingering more. Meals stretched longer, conversations grew deeper. We became unafraid of touch. Noah's hand on my shoulder as he passed behind me in the kitchen, Tyler brushing hair from my face when we were out in the garden. It felt like rediscovering love in its purest form. The love between people who have endured, who have witnessed each other's worst and chosen to stay. But there were nights I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was reading too much into these moments. Wondering if it was loneliness that made me crave more from the boys I had once rocked to sleep. Or maybe it wasn't craving, it was recognition. Recognition of the people we had become. Of the fact that they were no longer just my sons. They were my closest companions. My emotional equals. And that realization frightened me. Because I didn't know what to do with it. One morning, I came downstairs to find Noah making breakfast. He was humming to himself, wearing the sweatshirt I'd bought him last Christmas, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. "You're up early," I said. "Wanted to let you sleep," he replied, then glanced at me. "You looked peaceful last night." The word struck me. He'd been watching me. I couldn't decide whether it unsettled or comforted me. He handed me a mug of coffee, our fingers brushing. I held his gaze for a moment longer than I should have, and he didn't look away. "I worry about you sometimes," he said. "Why?" "You give so much. I don't want you to forget you deserve to receive, too." The tears came unexpectedly. I turned away, embarrassed, but Noah reached out and gently took my hand. "You've held us up for so long," he said softly. "Let us hold you now." And I did. Just for a moment. I leaned into his shoulder, letting the warmth of him wrap around the ache I didn't even know I'd been carrying. It was a simple moment, but it changed everything. It was Noah's idea. Or at least, that's what he claimed as he stood in the doorway of my bedroom one Thursday morning, grinning like he used to when he brought home a stray kitten or an overdue library notice. "We're something nice tonight," he said, arms folded, voice light but sure. I raised an eyebrow, still half tucked in my robe. "Is that your way of asking me out on a date?" He laughed, but his smile softened. "Tyler and I made a reservation. It's just dinner. Our treat. Both of you?" I asked. "Both of us," he confirmed. "You've done enough for us. We want to return the favor." It was the kind of gesture that should have made me simply grateful, but something about the way he said it, gentle, careful, made my breath catch for a moment. There was a quiet reverence in his tone. Like this wasn't just dinner. Like it was something more. I dressed slowly that evening. I don't know why I took such care. Maybe it was the way Noah had looked at me, or the slight excitement in Tyler's voice when he called up the stairs. "You ready, Mom?" I chose a deep green dress I hadn't worn in years, one with soft fabric that skimmed my figure and sleeves that fluttered like whispers. When I came down the stairs, the house fell quiet. Both boys were waiting by the door, dressed handsomely in button-ups and clean jackets. But what stunned me wasn't their appearance. It was what they were holding. A bouquet. No, the bouquet. It was wrapped in soft ivory paper, full of white lilies, peonies, and tiny sprigs of baby's breath. The kind of flowers you'd find in an old romance film, delicate and timeless. For you, Tyler said, his voice a little shy, like he was 13 again, giving a valentine to a girl he wasn't sure liked him back. I took it stunned. The scent was fresh and sweet and familiar. You two planned this? We wanted to remind you how much you matter, Noah added, stepping beside his brother. Not just as our mom. As you. There was a lump forming in my throat before we even reached the car. The restaurant was one I'd only admired through windows before. Small, quiet, dimly lit, tables glowing with amber candles, the kind of place people went to whisper dreams and confessions. We sat by the window, the storm of the outside world held back by soft jazz and warm wine. It should have been simple. It wasn't. They asked me questions they hadn't before, not about errands or bills or family, but about me. What books I was reading. What dreams I still had. What I wanted from the years ahead. I was surprised by how long it took to answer. I wasn't used to thinking about myself. Tyler watched me the entire time I spoke, his chin propped on one hand, his eyes soft. And when I caught Noah staring, he didn't look away. It should have been strange. But it wasn't. It was comforting. It was something warmer. When we returned home, the house felt different. Not in any physical way. The walls were still familiar, the furniture still worn. But the air between us had changed. Like the unspoken had finally been allowed to breathe. We ended up in the kitchen. Noah opened a bottle of wine, and Tyler lit a candle on the counter for ambience, he said. But I saw the smile he tried to hide. It flickered in the candlelight, like something unguarded and earnest. I sat between them on the couch, my feet tucked under me, the bouquet now resting in a vase on the dining table. It was all too much and not enough at the same time. Noah poured me another glass and leaned back, one arm resting behind me on the back of the couch. I felt it brush my shoulder but didn't move. Tyler was sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking up at me with a gentle kind of reverence I didn't know how to explain. I still can't believe you wore that dress, he murmured. I laughed softly. Why? You don't think I can pull it off anymore? No, he said, shaking his head slowly. You looked beautiful. The word hung in the air. Noah didn't contradict it. He simply looked at me the same way. That was the moment I felt it, fully, unmistakably. A warmth blooming in the space between us, intimate and careful and quiet. Not inappropriate, but not entirely maternal, either. It wasn't about desire. It was about recognition. They saw me. Really saw me. Not just as the woman who packed their lunches and mended their shirts, but as a woman with a heart still open, still tender, still capable of being known. The closeness that had grown over months, the glances, the long talks, the brushes of fingertips and lingering smiles, it all came into focus. I rested my head lightly on Noah's shoulder. Tyler reached up and took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. And for a long, breathless moment, we sat like that, 3 hearts beating quietly in sync, each of us pretending not to notice how profoundly something had shifted. It wasn't spoken, but it was understood. I don't know when it became normal, this quiet rhythm between the 3 of us. After that night, nothing was said aloud, yet everything changed. The little gestures grew heavier with meaning. Tyler brushing the hair from my face as I read on the porch. Noah making coffee in the morning and setting it gently beside me before I even asked. Dinners turned into long evenings where the 3 of us would linger at the table long after the plates had cooled, sharing stories, soft laughter, and glances that felt like pauses in a sentence we were all afraid to finish. We had fallen into a new orbit, the 3 of us circling something unspoken. One Sunday it rained. Not the kind of rain that rushed and roared, but the kind that whispered on the windows and filled the house with a hush that begged for stillness. I was curled in the living room, book on my lap, when Noah walked in, barefoot and sleepy-eyed. Tyler followed, carrying a blanket we all ended up sharing on the couch, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was between them, the warmth of their bodies pressing softly into mine, our shoulders brushing, our legs overlapping slightly beneath the heavy knit fabric. The television flickered across our faces, but none of us were really watching. Noah shifted, his arm resting along the back of the couch behind my head. Tyler leaned against my shoulder, his fingers toying absent-mindedly with the sleeve of my sweater. It felt safe, quietly profound, like we had drifted somewhere far beyond the usual roles we once fit so neatly into. I was their mother, but I was also something else now, someone they cherished, someone they saw, someone they chose to be near. In the hush of the moment, I closed my eyes. And for a while, I simply let myself be held. That night, as I got ready for bed, I stared at my reflection in the mirror longer than I usually did. I wasn't the girl I once was, no. My body carried the softness of years lived, of lives nurtured. There were fine lines around my eyes, the kind that come from laughter and sorrow in equal measure. But in that moment, I didn't see weariness. I saw strength. I saw a woman still learning how to love herself, how to be loved in return. I didn't lock my bedroom door that night. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards settling in the warmth. And then I heard it, the soft knock. It was Noah. He stood there, barefoot, shirt wrinkled, hair a little tousled like he'd fallen asleep on the couch. His expression was unreadable, cautious. "Couldn't sleep," he said softly. I nodded once, stepping back. He entered the room, glancing around like he wasn't sure if this was real or some passing dream. Tyler followed a few minutes later, his entrance wordless, eyes flicking to mine as if asking a silent question. I didn't answer aloud, but I didn't stop them. We sat together on the bed at first, knees bent, backs to the headboard, wrapped in the comfort of the quiet. There was no rush, no plan, no urgency. Just the three of us, caught in something deeper than family, something warmer than friendship, something almost holy in how fragile and gentle it was. Noah's hand found mine again. Tyler leaned his head against my shoulder. And I, surrounded by their presence, felt something bloom within me, something I hadn't felt in years. Not romance, not desire, something gentler, the feeling of being adored, treasured, held, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. "You've always been everything," Tyler whispered suddenly, his voice thick. "We just didn't know how to tell you." "You raised us," Noah added, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. "But you saved us too, in ways we don't even have words for." I swallowed the lump in my throat, my eyes burning. "I did what any mother would," I murmured. "No," Noah said, shaking his head. "You did what only you could." And then there was nothing but stillness again, the kind that settles when all the words have been said and only the truth remains. We fell asleep that way, entwined, quiet, home. When morning came, light spilled through the curtains like forgiveness. Noah was still beside me, his breathing slow and steady, his fingers still curled around mine. Tyler was at the foot of the bed, one arm thrown over a pillow, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. And I felt a calm settle deep into my chest. There was no guilt, no fear, just the understanding that something had been broken open and reshaped into something whole, something tender. Love, I realized, doesn't always look the way the world tells us it should. Sometimes it grows quietly, like ivy on a wall you never meant to build. Sometimes it is born in the space between grief and hope. Sometimes it finds you at your most unguarded and stays. That morning, I made breakfast while they slept. I moved slowly, with care, letting the eggs sizzle and the kettle sing. I set 3 plates, 3 mugs, 3 chairs. And when the boys finally wandered in, still warm from sleep, I met them with a smile I didn't have to force. We sat together as we always had. But now something had changed. The lines between us had softened. And in their place, a quiet, impossible closeness had taken root. A love deeper than names. A bond unbreakable. A warmth we would carry forward, whatever the world chose to call it. Because we knew. And sometimes that was enough.